So more than 70 countries criminalize LGBT people in one way or another, which obviously leads to people being in danger and in danger of violent life. Lyosha, you're from Russia. You were a professor there. After Vladimir Putin, after they passed that 2013 anti-gay law, which basically is propaganda, the propaganda law they called it, what was life like for you? And what was life like for you as an educator who was also teaching about sexuality?
It never was easy, even before 2013, but it was relatively free. There is no institutional criminalization of different activities in terms of queer studies. But when the law was passed and Federal Security Service gained the power, and they immediately called me out because I was deputy dean, I was doing queer studies, I was openly gay, and they invited me over. And basically, they were recruiting me to report on different students who are, as he said, communists, nationalists, homosexualists. So he perfectly knew who was I. And after that, he started following me, and I was chased by a right-wing activist group. I had to move from one apartment and hide myself. And for last 6 months, I was in Russia. I was using only private car, because it was not so safe. And one article came out eventually, and some right-wing activist group were demanding to fire myself for propaganda of sodomy at Perm State University. And that article our rector got. And it was already clear that I couldn't stay there, so I didn't tell anybody, of course. But it was the law oriented and focused on not protecting children, as it says, but on chasing people who are opposing the Putin's regime in terms of traditional values. So all of us all of a sudden became national betrayals. That's why I had no choice to flee the country.
For any of you who've read Masha Gessen's book, Lyosha is featured in it. I just want to read quickly so we have a sense of describing what it was like for you. Masha writes, gays had become public enemy #1 in Russia. Foreign agents, the foot soldiers of the looming American takeover, a threat to the foundational values of European civilization. Satan, pedophilia, American aggression, the death of the Christian civilization, and of course, the demographic threat. It was all about the gays now.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate?
It's all because even my students started calling me liberas. It's two words, liberal and tolerant person. So it's a very derogatory term to describe the person who protects and who promotes liberal values. So all of a sudden we became enemy of the state. And it's not only for Putin. Putin is distancing himself. It's about some people from the ground, from all of this far right sector, and Orthodox Church, which is empowered right now. And to me, it's very impossible to believe that for the last 5 years, the church has gained power because Russia has been an atheistic country. So all of a sudden, everybody started believing God. And even though it's only 1% of population who believes in Orthodox values. So that's why, to me, it was amazing, because I've survived 3 political epochs in Russia. Soviet Union, Yeltsin's times in 90s and 2000s. So I know how it was in the 90s. So even with all of this ferocious and savage culture, we were relatively safe, because all of a sudden the United States came over. And all of these products and gay porno and gay literature and everything. So, and in 2013 and 14, it has become kind of problematic for those people who used to use those resources.
Were you physically hurt at all?
Yes, of course.
How?
In 2011, I was cut. My chain was cut, and they put some stretches on my. So it was homophobes, not random attack, because Federal Security Service already was chasing me down. They were collecting some information, and I knew about it. And before, I was beaten severely, and half of my face was paralyzed for 6 months. So I had experienced a lot of violence, and I'm not telling about how my peers and friends were dying from not only suicide, from some kind of violent behavior of random people, and it's beyond my reach. I cannot imagine.
Kimahli, let's bring you into the conversation, because your organization, the Rainbow Railroad, obviously a take on the Underground Railroad, is wanting to help people escape situations like this. First of all, how long has the Rainbow Railroad been around? And over the course of its existence, how many people has it helped leave these situations?
So Rainbow Railroad was established in 2006 with the goal of helping people facing persecution find safety. And we started as a small group of volunteers, but over the past 3 or 4 years decided to really establish ourselves as an organizational structure. And that gave us the fuel to help more people at a rapid clip. In 2015, we helped 29 people find safety. Last year was 81, and this year is 180 people. So far we've helped over 350 people find safety.
Yes. How do people find out about you, and how do you decide which cases to take, which ones you really think can be successful?
Yeah, it's difficult. You know, paying homage to the Underground Railroad. You know, we were a small organization flying under the radar until all of a sudden the Chechen crisis kind of plucked us from obscurity. But like the Underground Railroad, the more people that you help, the more people find out about you. And so, you know, we now have someone who, unfortunately, his full-time job is to hear the hundreds of stories of people who are all over the world facing persecution, stories like yourselves who are in immediate crisis. And so we're now over 1,000 requests this year alone. Wow. And it's a kind of confluence of opportunity and how. We tier our requests based on who has access to documents, where they're located, and where we can actually get them to safety. And so it fluctuates.
In terms of the Chechen crisis, one of the things that's interesting and bizarre about it, this idea that they are rounding up gay men and torturing them and then giving them back to their families and telling their families to honor kill them, is that the government is saying we don't have any gay people. So how are you able to go to the Canadian government and say, look, we have this issue, but the other government where it's happening isn't even recognizing it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It was funny to hear Kadyrov have that clip saying the gays aren't here, but if they are here, send them to Canada. And at that time, they were already in Canada. So it was the biggest piece. The strategy was to try to get as much information as possible. What's unfortunate about the state of kind of news media and instant sensational media is that when the Novaya Gazeta first published information, it was picked up by the New York Times, there was a lot of misinformation. And so the term gay concentration camp came out. And so you had this sense that there was a permanent detention facility and people couldn't get out. And so we actually had to find out on the ground what was happening. That included my own trip to Russia, where people had escaped to safe houses to hear firsthand what was going on. And once we realized that people were managing to escape through this route through our amazing colleagues at the Russian LGBT network, we then realized that we had a legitimate pathway to get them out. And we are, we're experts on verifying and understanding cases. So, rather, doesn't really matter what Kadyrov says. There are hundreds, thousands of people living underground as a result of this action. Yeah. Very manipulative tactics to get these individuals to meet. So imagine if any of you were on an app and making arrangements to meet up with someone, and instead of meeting up with that person, you met up with an armed militia. They put a sack over your head, they throw you in the trunk of their car, and then you're beaten and tortured for the sole purpose of getting more names. And so it, and you mentioned Masha Gessen. Masha Gessen went to the region and did detailed reporting. There's a great New Yorker piece I recommend on it. And so it was that fact-finding mission, which is part of the work we do, which allowed us to kind of identify what was happening and compel the government to help act.
Are you ever concerned that you'll be infiltrated?
There is a reason why no one's heard of us up until now.
It's sort of a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, it was a big part of our mission and mandate was to try to do this work quietly. We thought long and hard about whether we should make any of what happened in Chechnya public, but we had this intense public interest and individual supporting from all over the world, and so we felt. At that point, we had an obligation to inform the public that we had acted on this, but it's conflicting. It's conflicting whether it complicates the work we do for others now that we're so out in the open. But on the other hand, if it's given a beacon of hope for someone who's in a country facing persecution, then it might be worth it.
Lyosha, you decided to come to the United States. Why did you decide to come to the United States, and what did you find when you got here?
So So I was lucky because I already had open tourist visa, because otherwise I couldn't escape. And if I will tell somebody, they never will let me out. And when I got here, it was completely, it's devastation, because you have nothing here. You have to start over with your PhD there and your status there and all of your research. You have to abandon. You have to get over your life and start it over from here. And for a person who is always in the public spotlight and been teaching for a long time, it was months of silence. You didn't know anyone until you met some people from my Russian-speaking community, and I was engaged with Russian-speaking LGBT support group, and all of a sudden I found RUSA LGBT organization, which I run right now. So, but it was totally understandable that I have to do something a part of my previous job. So, I was doing off-the-book job. I was distributing postcards in order to survive, because I don't get mistaken, because Russian professors don't earn money. There is no money. It's like my students who work for McDonald's, they make more money than Russian professors. So I came here without any money. So it was very tough. And but we filed our application for asylum, and I've been waiting for 2.5 years to get the interview. And it happened relatively like a couple months ago, not a couple months ago, 7 months ago, and I got my asylum only in March 2017. So from 2014 to 2017, I had been waiting that it could be done, my process and asylum. It's very frustrating for a lot of people who come, because I've been working for 3.5 years with people from all over the Soviet Union republics. So it's very tough.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's like, and with our culture, our mentality, we are not used to be in capitalistic world. So that's why everybody who comes here, we are entitled to get it. So they don't have any idea that they have to move themselves forward, live themselves up. And sometimes it's a problem that they settle down in Russian-speaking communities, which remain very homophobic and conservative.
I was going to ask you that.
Very homophobic and conservative. 70% of people coming to New York, they settle down in Brighton Beach area.
Yeah.
That's why it was my idea to launch the first Brighton Beach Pride on May 20th, 2017. We shake this house and we declare that we are queer, we are here. So, because, can you imagine, they come, thank you. They're coming from very hostile environment, when they were beaten up, were verbally abused, and they received the same treatment in New York, the city of diversity, salad bowl, melting pot, whatever you call it. So, and all of a sudden, they go off the book to work, and employers humiliate them, verbally abuse them, and they have no idea they have law. They can address those issues to New York City government, because they're afraid of the police. Because police is not your friend and not your ally in our countries. So that's why, and medical facilities, can you imagine, they come there, and people who've been here for 30 years, they still call them sodomites, faggots, and whatever. So that's why it was very necessary to launch that event, and we are going to continue. Now we have a huge backlash, but New York City all of a sudden has recognized us. We were given with proclamation of honor, blah, 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 but it's all of this, can I say bullshit? Because...
you did, so...
Yeah, sorry, I apologize, because I prefer actions rather than words.
Okay.
That's it.
And last question, in terms of actions, how are you funded, the Rainbow Railroad?
So we're 100% privately funded, and so and we intend to keep it that way. It puts us in a stronger position to work with the government and others, but it's also our message to the community. If the international community believes that this work is possible, we'll continue going with the support. There was one individual, thank you, there was one individual in the US who launched a Facebook fundraiser in the middle of the Chechen crisis, and he helped raise $250,000 by 10,000 donors, and so it's the power of our community together that will help save lives.
Let's thank our panelists.